Hello. When Tears of the Kingdom was announced in 2019, and we found out it was going to be reusing assets the same way Majora's Mask did over 20 years ago now, it was pretty safe to assume we'd get it a lot sooner than we actually did. The final months before release had fans stuck in a perpetual pee-pee dance, including me. This had been the longest development cycle for a mainline Zelda in series history. Over 6 full years, 2,661 days. And I didn't type the number into the script. I typed it in fucking Word form just to remind myself how long this shit took. Pandemic or no pandemic, that's not only enough time to build on Breath of the Wild's mechanics, storytelling, and world design. Theoretically, that's enough time to make a genuinely perfect video game under the right circumstances. At the very least, a perfect sequel. But what playing this game taught me the most is that no matter how much money pours in, no matter how much time they're given, no matter how talented or hardworking a studio is, we're never going to get a game that is truly perfect. We're not going to get close. But goddamn, if the Zelda team isn't going to try. Alright, fuck it. We're gonna start with this. I did not care for building things in this game. I appreciate the ingenuity on the side of the developers and the creativity on the side of the community. The consensus by fans and by other developers online is that Ultra Hand and all the systems orbiting it are a genuine feat of programming and technology, and I will not disagree with that. I don't have the background to even begin to argue against it. On top of that, I think it's a natural progression of Breath of the Wild's physics systems. It built upon a very solid foundation, and in a gameplay sense, it was an obvious and well-executed next step. I don't want to diminish the fun and absolutely wild shit people are doing and will continue doing for probably years into the future based off how often Breath of the Wild clips still pop up onto my timeline. But that's just not the kind of player I am. I'm much more a fan of handcrafted content in games than I am the Minecraftian sandbox style. I respect it, but it's just not for me. The most I experimented with it was on the tutorial Sky Island, but after I found out the most efficient way to travel was screwing 2 fans to a fucking steering wheel, I pretty much gave up on doing anything else. Speaking of which, I thought the tutorial was really well done. I spent, I think, almost 4 hours on the thing, which might be as long as it took me to finish the Great Plateau, but I can't really remember. It was probably the most exciting part of the entire game. I'd stayed far away from almost every bit of marketing and talk about the game pre-release, so aside from the few short trailers Nintendo had shown us, I barely knew anything. Back in the day, I'd spoiled myself on most of Breath of the Wild before I got my hands on it. And while it was a magical experience still, this time I wasn't gonna lose out on the excitement of opening a door and not knowing what was on the other side. And while I was playing, I remember thinking how glad I was that I did that. A brand new set of abilities and entirely new systems to mess with, and a completely new offering of NPCs and enemies to learn about. It was honestly kind of exhilarating. I wish I'd savored it a little more once I realized that the tutorial was the best thing the Sky Islands had to offer, but we'll come back to that later. Like Ultra Hand, the abilities we get are a natural extension of Breath of the Wild systems, but these specifically feel more important and useful, especially in tandem with each other in both combat and exploration. I do still believe the foundation of the combat isn't anything amazing. The 3 weapon types and the raw feel of them have never felt anything more than simple and serviceable to me. Now, while I did say I don't really care for the openness and exploration with the building, I do really like how these new abilities and the foundational physics of the world itself come together to create a combat system that feels like a good step up. If you've watched my only other video, you know how cool and important player expression is to me. And this game is like if those 2 words had babies, and those babies' names were Kino, Peak, Goat, Raw, and Swag. I do miss being able to launch myself hundreds of feet clinging to a log for dear life with stasis, or having to choose between a bomb that rolls or a bomb that also rolls but just not as good, but fuck all that. Check this out. I can use recall on a rock. Nope. I can use recall on a rock that a boss bokoblin throws at me, and with that small window of time between me activating recall and the rock returning to the big guy's face to do some damage, I can use the ascend ability to shoot up through the rock while it's suspended in the air. After I do that, I can backflip off the rock and activate bullet time, at which point I can use the fuse ability to attach some bullshit to my arrows and just go to fucking town. You see what I'm getting at here? Not only does it look sick as hell to pull off, I just used 3 of my 4 abilities together to whip up an effective combat strategy. Most of the new enemies themselves are either designed in a way or have moves that let you take advantage of the new abilities too. One specific thing I thought was really cool was how the Stone Talus' rock fists are now an opportunity for recall. There's a level of cohesiveness and complexity here that'll keep players of all skill levels trying and figuring out new things for years. It's just fucking cool. Now, once the tutorial is done, and you've given the Master Sword to Zelda, you get to do the second huge leap of faith down to the surface. Something I never got tired of doing, even after 100 hours of playing, by the way. Plunging into the water below, swimming out, and taking a look around. Holy fuck. It was about 5 in the morning the day of release when I got to this part. It was just me in the game. And I really want to emphasize this point. I felt so genuinely, so unbelievably overwhelmed by everything that I was seeing, to the point where I just had to go to bed. I wasn't tired, I didn't have anything to do that day. It was cleared for this game. I was free for Zelda. But I knew I wasn't in the right headspace to even decide which direction I wanted to go in. So I went to bed, woke back up, and still struggled to orient myself. The idea that something as simple as running around and exploring having a learning curve is hilarious to me. I hope I'm not the only one who felt this way, and honestly, the first few hours down on the surface felt almost detrimental to the experience. When you get the paraglider in Breath of the Wild, you do have the choice to go in any direction you please, but I feel like there was a natural push to go forward. The Great Plateau is in a place where most of the map is in front of it, and my natural inclination was to just go straight ahead. But in Tears of the Kingdom, you land right here. Almost right in the center, in the eye of the storm. So many new things caught my eye as I took it all in. One of my favorite things about this game is the rhythm of exploration and the way it made me feel like I had conquered the world and had a leash on it towards the end. But alongside the excitement I felt upon first landing, there was also an anxiety and a pressure right next to it. I just feel like there was a way to introduce you to the new and improved Hyrule without throwing everything in your face at once. I want to applaud the developers for making changes to the surface that were interesting and made it feel mostly new. I spent around 300 hours playing Breath of the Wild in 2017, and in 2023, while the surface does feel similar, it never felt quite the same. But the new world content is terrible. I'm sorry. The depth's luster wore off not that far in, and I eventually decided to avoid it almost entirely, going down only for Zonite to upgrade my battery so my fan Segway could fly higher. Aside from the Yiga Clan side adventure, I barely found any content worth doing down here or anything that even motivated me to explore. The fan service outfits are the only thing worth getting, and I still barely gave a fuck. On top of all that, it's pitch black down there, and only lit with light roots that you activate. It's a cool idea, but frankly, antithetical to the design of the surface, where it was deliberately made in a way that would draw you to places and encouraged exploration with shrines, towns, and generally well-designed and interesting landmarks. It sucks. I don't like it. End of story. There are also these caves and small underground areas littered across the surface that got repetitive for me too. I want to point out the absolute worst offender in this case. The thing that I have a personal vendetta against. The Akkala Citadel Ruins. While the inside wasn't explorable in Breath of the Wild, there is an entire level in the Warriors spin-off, Age of Calamity, where you storm the Citadel and make your way to the top. It's a real, constructed place with staircases, rooms, and everything. Two very different games, I know, but I think it's relevant. My point is, they could have turned this mysterious tower into an actual place, something the citizens of Hyrule could have rediscovered and restored, like they've been doing in other areas. But no, it's a big hole in the dirt. You're gonna fight some monsters and walk around the dirt hole for a few minutes, and then you'll leave. Every cave is like this. There are dozens. Dirt hole, monkey goblin, maybe an armor piece if you're lucky. The cave's main draw are these bubble frogs that drop gems that you spend at a shop. Like the depths, I gave up on them once I realized how pointless they were to me. The Sky Islands are almost as disappointing, but at least they look pretty. The sky was a central part of this game's marketing. Almost every trailer we saw had Link doing something on these Sky Islands. Those and the new Skyview towers are great for surface exploration, giving you vantage points and more interesting ways to get to places. It's all a part of that feeling of conquering the world I mentioned earlier, and it streamlines the practice of exploring the content that's actually good and elevates the scale to make the game feel more grand and exciting as a whole. I could feel the sense of wonder physically leaving my body once I realized that aside from that, the rest of these Sky Islands are glorified shrine quests or reused boss fights. It's so sad that we got two entirely new areas to explore, and the best parts of the game are in a place that I've already spent hundreds of hours exploring years ago. It makes this sequel feel like less than it actually is, and it makes me wonder if it was really worth the 6-year wait. The best new content in this game is on the surface, and it's actually not stuff you're gonna come along naturally like you would a shrine or an enemy camp. You kinda gotta dig for it. Tears of the Kingdom's best moments are in the side adventures and the unbelievable amount of love poured into the characters that populate the world. The best part about getting this kind of sequel, one that reuses the same map, is revisiting your favorite places and seeing how they've changed. I went to Hitino Village first and found myself in the middle of an election between a traditional man who wanted to ground the town in its roots and grow the economy with vegetables and cheese, and a hat-cocked liberal who was winning over the town with the promise of tourism and shiny new fashion trends. You help with both of their campaigns by offering bribes to certain people in the community, and spy on the candidates by the request of people close to them. Through the detective work, you find out that these two people have more in common than you thought, and it all comes together with this revelation in the end that they should be supporting each other to create a stronger community instead of fighting and dividing it. It's not deep, but it's such a fun way to explore the characters that exist here more deeply than Breath of the Wild ever did. And that's not the end of it here in Hateno. There's a school where you can sit in on a lesson and even help teach the children of the village. If you visit the house you owned in the last game, you can find information that'll lead you to Zelda's secret study, which nets you the headband you lost in the opening of the game. If you read her diary, it'll tell you where you can find a new and improved champion's tunic. If I kept going about every detail and nook and cranny in Hateno, I'd be here for an hour. Kakariko also has a ton of new, interesting stuff happening. Terrytown has expanded beyond the rock island it once existed on, and has one of the most heartwarming quests in the entire game. This quality and liveliness pervades nearly every populated area, and I don't think I've even seen half of it. It's wonderful. The few things I mentioned here alone justify the reuse of the map. And I hate to go back to being negative again, but I promise I'll come back around at the end. Tears of the Kingdom's dungeons are embarrassing. I want to keep this short because they took up so little of my playtime, but I think they're arguably among the worst in the series. Each of the 4 take place in the same regions that the Divine Beast did in Breath of the Wild, and I like that there's a genuine threat to every race of people taking place when you get there. Watching the world improve because of what you did to help is rewarding, but the means in which you improve the world is sad, and honestly an insult to the dungeons of games past. It feels like the team just doesn't know how to translate the open nature of overworld exploration and puzzle solving to a large but more confined space. How would I design a dungeon layout that adheres to the game's absurdly open-natured philosophy in a way that can make players think like other Zelda dungeons did in decades past? Hell if I know. My head starts hurting at the thought. But I'm not Fujibayashi, I'm not Aonuma, it's not my job. Every dungeon consists of hitting a number of switches that open up the door to the final boss. 90% of these switches require an IQ of 6 to get to, and each final boss felt way too easy. They would have been fantastic if they were just more difficult. I don't understand why they can make overworld enemies completely disrespect you, and have these bosses go down so easy at the same time. I know this game has a hidden scaling method, so just apply it here. Aside from all that, I think they're fun. Each boss is unique and uses your sage partner's powers and the environment in a creative way. It just makes for a big "that's it" moment every time. Shrines are better now. A lot of them actually have what I think the dungeons needed. The best shrines make you really think about how you can use your newfound abilities to their greatest capacity. But those same shrines also let you figure things out in whichever way you want to. You could do this puzzle that takes a little bit of time and brainpower, or you could just strap a bomb to your shield and hop right over it. You feel like a genius either way, and I loved it. Other shrines take the Eventide Island challenge from Breath of the Wild and make it a little more bite-sized. These were a humbling reminder every time I ran into one. A lot of shrines, though, are Rauru's Blessing. I don't mind a freebie once in a while, but out of the 90 or so shrines I did, it felt like there were a lot. One totally fakes you out, though, and it was hilarious. I don't know about you, but I did not come into this game expecting a better story than what Breath of the Wild gave us. I don't think the story is what any of us played Breath of the Wild for. You have to essentially find the story here in the same way you did last time. I like the idea of having to stand in a specific spot to jog Link's memory, but I remember getting so frustrated at how you needed to be in an exact spot to actually activate the cutscene. To the point where I would get to where I thought I needed to be, couldn't find the prompt, ran around for 15 minutes, and just ended up pulling out my phone and looking up exactly where it was. This time around, memories are found in geoglyphs, which are giant crop circles laid out across Hyrule. You have to find a dragon tear in the geoglyph to activate the cutscene, and I like how much simpler it all is to do now. Also, they're just another showcase for this game's insane draw distance. The memories aren't shown from Link's perspective this time, they're shown from Zelda's. At the beginning of the game, your first encounter with Ganondorf causes the ground to crumble beneath Link and Zelda's feet. While Link is caught by the sentient arm that was grabbing Ganondorf before shit went down, Zelda plummets into the darkness, Link just barely missing the catch, before she disappears in a flash of light. She reappears in the past, and the plot follows her and the Zonai, an ancient and honestly very boring race of furry gods that were the founders of Hyrule. At first, Zelda and the Zonai are trying to figure out how exactly she got there, and how she can return to the present to help Link defeat Ganondorf. She eventually gets caught up in a war between the Gerudo King and the rest of Hyrule called the Imprisoning War. It's so good to see Ganondorf again, man. His presence just dominates any cutscene he's in, and he just looks so sexy. What a beautiful, terrifying wall of a man. He's the same Ganondorf we know and love, the manipulative, conniving, power-hungry Gerudo we've known for decades. I want to talk about how he's handled in Tears of the Kingdom specifically, but I have to talk about another aspect of the story before I can do that. In hindsight, I feel really stupid for not understanding who the Light Dragon was. The game is called Tears of the Kingdom, the memories are called Tears of the Dragon, and the cutscenes are from Zelda's perspective. But in my defense, I got the fifth memory last, which is arguably the most important piece of this puzzle. In that cutscene, you learn that the stones each sage has amplifies their powers, and to eat one is a forbidden practice that turns you into an immortal dragon. When I heard this, it all instantly clicked in my head, but I could not believe that it was actually going to happen. There was no fucking way.
しかし伝承には続きがあります。竜へと姿を変えた者の心は永劫に戻らない。
I sprinted to the last tier and lost myself in that final memory. Not only did Zelda sacrifice herself to keep the Calamity Ganon at bay for 100 years, letting go of everything she knew, but she sacrificed her entire being, essentially dying to become the Light Dragon to restore the Master Sword over a period that could have been thousands of years. In the first memory, we find out that the Master Sword has the ability to heal itself over time. You can poke hole after hole in the story if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, like most time travel stories, but that isn't the point. The point of this is to make the player feel. The point is that this iteration of Zelda only knows suffering. She has lived dozens, maybe hundreds of lifetimes through her sacrifices, and that makes up entirely for how bad her English voice acting is. We gotta put some respect on this woman. I'll stand by the fact that this aspect of the story is high up on my personal Zelda story rankings, and it doesn't end there. There's more, and it's fantastic. Once the 4.25 dungeons are done, I started my journey beneath Hyrule Castle, and this place kicked my ass. I had no food that restores hearts blocked by gloom, so when I finally reached Ganon, I got my fucking ass beat. Whew. Yeah, man, that was a boss fight. You know, it only took me a couple tries, but I got it down. You know, he's pretty... Oh. I'm glad that instead of taking half of Ganon's life away like they did in Breath of the Wild, they doubled it. Once you finish his second phase, Ganondorf knows he can't beat Link this way. In a desperate grab for power, he eats the stone he stole from Sonia and turns himself into a dragon. I don't exactly know how connected Calamity Ganon is to the Ganondorf we know now. They really screwed with the lore in this one. But he essentially regresses back into the form we knew before. This is something he's done before, though. It's very in character for Ganondorf to lose sight of his goals and himself in his conquest for power. What follows is one of the coolest sequences in the entire series. Once it's all said and done, Rauru and Sonia help restore Zelda to her human form. But they aren't going to help you reach the ground. This shit right here is perfect. No lie, no exaggeration, it's perfect. You spend so much time in Tears of the Kingdom just skydiving. It's such a well-made mechanic that you've been using for the entire game, and now you have to do it one last time. In my opinion, Tears of the Kingdom entirely replaces Breath of the Wild. Almost everything that Breath of the Wild has, Tears of the Kingdom does better. If someone were to come up to me and ask me if they should play Breath of the Wild first, I'd tell them no. That being said, I don't think it replaces the experience that I had with Breath of the Wild over 6 years ago now. New players are going to be absolutely enthralled with what this game has to offer, and I'm kind of jealous that they get to have that type of experience. There is a certain magic to coming back to an old place and seeing how it's changed, but I can't imagine how cool it would be to see this improved version of Hyrule on a first outing. It's never going to replace the sense of discovery and excitement that I felt when I walked into a version of Hyrule that was so fundamentally different from the ones that I grew up playing. It's a Breath of the Wild that feels more complete, but not entirely finished at the same time. After the game came out, Aonuma said, "Of course, the series continued to evolve after Ocarina of Time, but I think it's also fair to say now that we've arrived at Breath of the Wild and the new type of more open play and freedom that it affords. Yeah, I think it's correct to say that this has created a new kind of format for the series to proceed from. This is the new blueprint for Zelda now. The open nature of these past two games is here to stay, and I don't blame Nintendo for sticking to it. It's the most successful the series has ever been financially, and mainstream games media is too scared to actually say anything negative about the games like they always have. I do love these open world games, and Fujibayashi, Aonuma, and the Zelda team have proven to me that this series can still be incredible, even after all these years. But I think they still have a long way to go before they make something that's truly deserving of the unrelenting praise Tears of the Kingdom is getting.